December 21st, 1937. It was a historical night in Hollywood, as the Carthay Circle Theater held the world premiere of the most groundbreaking motion picture, Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was a star-studded event where the who's who of Hollywood attended to witness Disney's latest and greatest innovation of the first-ever feature cartoon, even though that was already a thing in Europe. The film was immediately hailed as a masterpiece, and what was once called Disney's folly turned into his biggest success yet. It was also what established the studio to become an animation powerhouse, as it went on to produce more beloved feature cartoons for generations to come. But even after several movies, none could compare to the legendary legacy of Snow White. It is a classic whose artistry still stands the test of time, and one whose impact in the world of cinema still resonates to this day. That is why it is not only considered one of the greatest motion pictures in history, but also one of Walt Disney's greatest achievements next to Mickey Mouse and Disneyland. Even during that special night at the premiere, everyone knew that they were witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime work of art, for no one could ever replicate the magic of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Well, that's not going to stop them from trying, though.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest of them all?
I don't think I'm alone when I say that I've been dreading this movie's release. Considering how Disney's been turning their animated classics into these live-action remakes, it's honestly hard to imagine what good could come out of giving their first movie this unfortunate treatment. I'll admit that when it comes to the original, I understand that it's kind of basic by today's standards, and since it is a movie from the late 1930s...
She's a female, and all females is poison. They're full of wicked wiles.
There might be a few outdated parts. However, it still works well in its own right, and the historical impact that it left to greatly advance the medium is a key factor to why Walt Disney's Snow White is still highly respected to this day. Sure, it's not the first animated feature ever, but animation would not be the prominent art form it is today if it weren't for Snow White. So the idea alone of remaking this into a live-action film feels a bit sacrilegious, as if Disney is now crossing into forbidden territory and risk tainting a legendary legacy just to find more material for their next remake. And the more that they slowly unraveled what's to come with this picture, the more that it feels like we're watching the Queen making her potion to turn herself into the old witch, complete with that sense of fear, wondering what terror we will see as a result of her concoction.
Oh, perfect disguise.
However, as much as many hate the trend itself of turning animated films into live-action remakes, and trust me, I am not a fan of it either, I have to admit that not all of them are bad. I'd even say that there are a few that are pretty good in their own right. But yes, I do agree that when they are bad, they can be atrocious. And that is especially the case with the ones based on Walt Disney's first features like Dumbo, and what I consider to be the worst yet, Pinocchio. I didn't even have to explain myself. That just summed up my thoughts perfectly. And that's honestly the big reason why I'm worried about the Snow White remake. It's not just that it's another Disney live-action remake, it's a live-action remake of one of Walt Disney's oldest classics, and they've so far been handling those terribly. But, who knows? Maybe this could be the exception. Again, it is possible that these remakes could turn out good, and since this is based on one of their most important features, maybe Disney will remake this more respectfully, right? Right? Well, in an interesting twist, this is not really a remake in the first place. I'll give the movie credit that this is not the kind of film that's just a straight-up copy of the original and does put more effort to be its own thing. It makes sense how it doesn't share the same title as the animated film by being called just Snow White, especially when the movie doesn't have dwarves and instead have these things that I will do everything in my power to call them anything but dwarves. Anyways, the film leans a lot more onto the plot point regarding Snow White trying to hide from the evil queen's jealousy, as the villain's power is threatened by the princess's kindness and wants to do everything to make sure that she's out of the picture. But with the help of some new allies that Snow White meets as she runs away, including a group of rebellious thieves and 7 CGI monsters, she develops the courage that her parents taught her to stand up for the people in her kingdom and stop the wrath of the Queen.
The Queen stole everything from all of us. I'm gonna need your help. It's time to restore our kingdom.
The movie does have the basics that could create a strong feature based on Snow White, but updated to be a little more than just the fairy tale and to make it stand out from the other adaptations, such as the message that speaks against authoritarianism, where leading with kindness is always greater than ruling with fear, and the casting for the leads is on point. You want a kind-hearted young girl with a beautiful singing voice? Then you get Rachel Zegler. You want a vain villain who steals lands from other kingdoms and is so desperate to kill a child in order to maintain power? Then you get an Israeli soldier. The foundation of the feature does feel like it's going somewhere. And yet, because of its Disney connection, I can't help but find that there's something familiar with this movie. Like it's more of a remake of something else than Snow White. But what is it?
I long to leave the walls behind me.
That's it! This is like a remake of Wish! I know this sounds crazy, but there's a lot of similarities to this and Wish. It's not just that it's a Disney film that stars one of the actors from 2021's West Side Story, but there's also the dynamic between the hero and the villain, along with their individual personalities, the way it's a fairy tale musical, the anti-authoritarianism message, and the assistance of forest animals and a diverse group of friends. I know that some of Wish was inspired by the original Snow White, which, funny enough, brings us full circle. And yet, this also shows the problems with Snow White's plot. Even when compared to Wish, the storytelling feels disjointed, where it doesn't know how to genuinely bring in elements like introducing characters or musical numbers without them feeling like they're suddenly thrown into the picture and expect the audience to just roll with it. That, and ironically, it doesn't do well when it tries to be a remake of Snow White. Anytime it wants to reference the animated feature, those moments feel rushed as if the movie almost forgot that it's a Snow White remake, and quickly crammed those elements in without making them feel like they belong in the movie. At the most, they only serve as reminders that Disney made this movie.
So we're so wild you were.
What the frick is going on? What is the emergency? Sheesh! What has gotten into people? I mean, was it something I said? I mean, is this about Wish? Oh, I get it now. Oh, uh-oh. I said Rachel Zegler, didn't I?
My apologies. It's just, I feel they need some kindness.
Well, I guess it's unavoidable now. If you're gonna talk about Disney Snow White and the 7 Little Nightmares, then the years of controversy leading up to its release will most likely be brought up. And a good amount of it is related to the film's leading actress. And I'm gonna be totally honest, but the grand majority of the hate here is stupidly overblown. It's one thing to resent this for being another live-action remake, but so much of it is based on fake issues that never caused real-world problems. It's already bad enough that the worst part of making this review is to go through the AI-generated sludge of angry white men who have to make a rant every time Rachel breathed in a funny way just to find a clip of the picture. I'm just saying, the race of the actress who would play Snow White in a Disney live-action remake, or how much diversity might be in it, will not affect the price of eggs or hinder the economy. This is one of the prominent examples of the worthlessness of culture wars, and all it does is point to the people who serve no value to our society. That instead of being a normal person and go to therapy to settle their anger management and lack of self-esteem, they engage in senseless online battles so that they could justify their beliefs that the fairy tale of white males are oppressed is somehow real, and use that as a mask to cover up the fact that their hatred for people different than them make their lives not matter. Not to mention how it leaves them vulnerable to be taken advantage by scammers who pretend to be Republicans like the Critical Drinker, Elon Musk, and those at the Daily Wire to leech off their money by continuously fueling their mental problem and promote domestic terrorism by encouraging them to send death threats to women of color. And by the way, if those quote-unquote right-wing influencers are real Republicans, then why do they have more sympathy for that United Healthcare CEO that got Luigi than their own followers who get taken advantage by rich elitists like him? But like they always do, their racism and misogyny leads them to eating crow because Rachel Zegler is actually one of the best things about Snow White and the Seven Deadly Sinners. On top of looking and singing the part, she was able to make the most out of the material she was given to show Snow White as the modern personification of kindness. It's not just to be nice to others, but to also have the courage to stand up for what is right and lead with selflessness to call out injustice. Sure, Zegler caused some of her own troubles, like having a bad take on the original Snow White, and hurting some people's feelings by stating facts about Donald Trump and Palestine, not to mention how she willfully starred in a terrible Disney ripoff that was produced by a predator, but I guess the internet has a problem with setting its priorities straight. But even with all that, I cannot deny that she had the film's best performance.
This is our kingdom, and now we're here to take it back.
You were saying.
However, I can't say the same about Gal Gadot as the evil queen. I don't know how much of that Wonder Woman star power she has left, but her talent ran thin in this, and her acting kind of feels flat where she doesn't hold the same threatening presence as the queen in the original. She kind of reminds me of Jafar from the Aladdin remake. Sure, she may look the part, but like the Magic Mirror would say, looks won't take you far if you don't act like the fairest of them all.
Pies are luxuries. They don't need luxuries. It confuses them.
But do you know what I was worried the most about seeing this movie? It's not the remake aspect, it's not Rachel Zegler, it's not Gal Gadot, it's not even getting into all that pointless drama that means nothing. It's the one thing that's consistently been the worst part of Disney's live-action remakes, and this one takes it to a whole new level. And if you still don't know what I'm talking about, I'm gonna give you second guesses to what that is. I get it, this is technically a remake of Disney's Snow White, and it's hard to imagine to tell the story without including the 7 dwarfs. However, what we ended up getting in this film is Snow White and the 7 man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. Who decided that taking some of Disney's most classic characters and making them as realistic as possible without changing any of their physical traits was a good idea? They could have done literally anything else to depict the characters, and it would have worked a lot better. Is it honestly so hard to find 7 little people to act in this movie? That's like the one controversy that I agree with. Heck, I would have taken Asha's friends over these beyond cursed beings. Anytime I see them try to be as animated or dynamic as the 1937 version, all they do is make me go, "What is this?" And what makes them even worse is that their personalities are as horrendous as their looks. They're all complete jerks who spend a good amount of the movie bullying Dopey. Not to mention how they try to give them extra lore like how they're immortal beings and have superpowers that helps them mine for gems, but they literally serve no purpose to the plot, and their roles don't go any further than how they were in the animated film. There's barely anything positive that could be said about them because their moments really spoil the feature. Seriously, how could people be more upset about Rachel Zegler and not by the presence of the 7 terrifying mutants? Oh wait, I know why.
But it's alright, cause it's alright.
But I want to clarify that I am not saying that the visual effects team did a horrible job. Like many of the other live-action remakes, it's the concept of making these cartoons hyper-realistic alone that is a lost cause that no animator could make them look good. I'll even say the same with the animals. As much as they try to act like in the animated film, they still run into the same problem of being realistic birds and mammals acting like cartoon characters, thus making it look like Rachel Zegler is surrounded by weird CG furballs.
My parents always said this forest was a magical place.
Unfortunately, I know this is not what many people want to hear from this, but that's the worst that the movie gets. Sure, those elements can get quite bad, but most of the feature is not as awful as its visual effects. In fact, I actually have some more positive things to say about the feature other than Rachel Zegler. Yes, as crazy as this may sound, there are some good things that can be found in Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys. Even though I just slammed the CG, the things that were in front of the camera actually make the feature look very nice. Both the set designs and the costumes do the best work to bring the animated feature into live action. On top of sharing the familiarity of the rich designs that made the original awe-inspiring to watch, they also made the film vibrantly colorful, even using that as part of the storytelling to show the mood of the characters and the kingdom. It may be a live-action film, but it does have the sensibilities of an animated film with how it gives importance to color theory.
We were really lucky to have Sandy Powell as our costume designer. The artistry she brings to this movie is really extraordinary.
Also, the one thing that this movie actually did better than the 1937 film is the chemistry of the romance. Well, that's actually not that hard to do, considering that the original had none. But in the remake, they changed up the prince into a bandit named Jonathan, and gradually throughout the movie, they show how the connection between him and Snow White grow into love and make their dynamic feel genuine every time they cross paths. I'll even add that Andrew Burnap is another great actor in this alongside Zegler, who really helped make this chemistry work. Okay, I know that it's more entertaining to hear what I didn't like about this movie, so if you want another shot at that, then let's talk about the songs.
And bring that dream to you, just like an echo.
Keep in mind that because it tries to be more like a reimagining than a remake, most of the songs are new from the songwriting duo Pasek and Paul, where the only ones from the animated film that you get here are Whistle While You Work and Hi Ho, and even those got significantly updated. This may be a hot take, but I am not a fan of the works of Pasek and Paul, and this is a strong example as to why. They made the soundtrack feel boring and bland. Their numbers are so safe that I could not remember any of those new songs here, even right after I left the theater. Not even Zegler's singing is enough to salvage the dull and out-of-place tone that they provide. And it always feels like a mistake whenever they work on these Disney live-action remakes because their contributions pale in comparison to the classics. That's honestly the biggest downside to the film not staying true to the source material. Instead of timeless tunes that make the film extra charming, we're stuck with the failed attempts of being the next This Is Me. After watching the film, I asked myself an interesting question. Would this movie be better if it were not associated with the 1937 film? You know, like, if it were its own original adaptation of the fairy tale, much like how Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland has no relation to the 1951 feature, even though it is still a Disney movie. And in a way, it could have improved some things, especially to have it be more of a unique Snow White adaptation. But then again, it wouldn't make it better by a whole lot because it's still quite a mixed bag in its own right. The 2025 remake of Disney's Snow White is not the cinematic disaster that many expected this to be, but it doesn't help the reputation of these live-action remakes either. There are parts of the feature that are surprisingly good, like Rachel Zegler's performance, the colorful costumes and sets, the upgraded romance, and trying to be more than a straightforward remake with its anti-authoritarian message. But it also has a lot of problems that holds it back from being generally good, like the dysfunctional storytelling, the clunky connection to the movie it's based on, the forgettably dull songs, Gal Gadot's flat acting, and especially the horrible CGI that spawned the 7 Eldritch Abominations. Did it deserve all the backlash it had gotten over the years? Obviously not. It's a harmless movie after all. But it can only leave a small fraction of an impact that the original animated feature made. It's honestly tough to say who I could recommend this to, especially when this is not the remake of Snow White that some may think this would be. But if you're looking for a new version of the classic tale, and the presence of Rachel Zegler doesn't make you do illegal actions like being racist, then you might get more out of this than I did. And if you got a lot out of this review, then press that like button and subscribe to my channel. You can also support my videos by joining my Patreon and get some fun rewards that will make you whistle a happy tune. Admittedly, this was not as bad as I thought it would be, but that's because I came in with low expectations. And with a mixed bag like this, it feels right to give this a mixed rating with a 5 out of 10. I'd hesitate to say that this is the worst Disney remake, but at the most, it's among one of their weaker ones. And I understand that many, especially animation fans, have grown tired of this whole trend of taking classic animated films and turning them into subpar live-action features. I even seen some claim that maybe Snow White will be the straw that will break the camel's back if it doesn't do well at the box office. Maybe that's just wishful thinking, but if that's the case, then that will also require the next one to fail to signify that these live-action remakes are no longer profitable. Speaking of which, what is Disney's next remake?
Hey, what are you doing?
Oh yeah, this trend is still gonna be going strong.
You know, I really don't remember you being this opinionated.